Welcome to Exit Philosophy with Mal Ramanan and myself, Rich Griffin, and we're just coming off a winter meetings that was busier, and we'll get into that, busier than normal, and a lot of it we know had to do with Juan Soto sort of breaking the dam with his agent Scott Boras, but we'll get into that. Right now, let me just update you on Exit Philosophy's schedule. We're now recording on Thursday morning, and next Thursday, which is the 26th, we'll have another Exit Philosophy. Then the 19th, we'll have an Exit Philosophy, take a week off, and then in the new year, we'll be back. So that'll be the schedule. We hope you're enjoying and subscribing and liking. We're going to be watching a lot of football in that week.
Yeah, right.
And we will try and update you on our picks, even though we're not going to be on the air. So the, the winter meetings, what did you think, Mal? Because I thought it was a really busy winter meetings, and the total dollars being spent be damned. That wasn't why I thought it was a really good winter meetings. But again, the key may have been in Scott Boras learning from last year's lesson of his own client list not settling last year until January, February. And this year he made sure that the big guy, Juan Soto, was settled early on the eve of the winter meetings on Sunday night after we had recorded our last podcast. They announced 15 years and $765 million. What did you think of that?
Well, I think actually I was pretty proud of how we kind of predicted how this would all shake out, and even to the fact that we thought this would get done by the winter meetings, um, for the reasons we were just talking about. I mean, there was no reason to drag this one on with Soto. You know who the players are. You know they're very limited, and it's just about getting to the point where you're going to maximize dollars, and then doing your Scott Boras thing, where you're the man and you get all the attention and look at me, which is a big part of the shtick and how how you manipulate markets and things like that. So I'm not surprised. Am I surprised that the dollars? God, yeah, I mean, it just never ceases to amaze that they could get to this level, and I think it is going to reverberate through Major League Baseball because I don't think he's a unique player by any means. He's a tremendous player, but now Boris can get back to the business of taking care of his clients, and he's got a lot of them, and not have what happened last year. You can't be playing everybody to the last minute because I think they've shown that there's the pushback there, and it could hurt. It can hurt the earning power of some of your guys. And Boris, smart guy. I don't think you're going to see it happen unless there might be a rare occasion, obviously, depending on the
Yeah.
market for certain guys.
In comparing the two contracts, and of course, Ohtani was not a Boras client, and it was unique in that it was 10 years, 700 million. So that's a higher on the face of it AAV than the one
Way
that
higher.
Soto got. So even though Soto's dollar figure is 765, that's for 15 years, and Ohtani was for 10 years with a lot of deferred money, and that's the key that probably not probably that would have kept the Blue Jays out of the equation is that and Boras didn't want any deferred money in this contract. They wanted it right there, right here, right now, and with no deferred. And that allowed for Boras and company to say that this is the biggest contract ever.
And that's what we were talking about last week when we're seriously asking the question, how could the Blue Jays be in it? And one of the reasons why they wouldn't be in it is this idea of deferred money. That is a very unique thing. Now, I get why teams would want to do it. It's very, very logical from a team perspective. Hey, push the money down the road, find ways to invest that money. It lessens the real dollar value of present day money. Soto wasn't, I said last week, what would be the incentive for Soto to do that? And the answer would be zero. And you saw that, and he
Yeah.
got his money. Like,
I think there's definitely mixed feelings on deferred contracts, and it only works for certain people. It would have worked for Rogers because of the, as we've talked about quite often, the Asian market for
yes.
wireless and streaming and cell phones and whatever else is on that horizon in that market. But it wouldn't have worked for Soto. And the other team it worked for is the Dodgers with Ohtani with the deferred money, because it's deferred money is so controversial because for $68 million, and this I read up on it, for $68 million that's being deferred, the Dodgers have to put that money aside, which means
Right.
that Guggenheim Partners, which is the owners of the Dodgers, the ownership group of the Dodgers, Guggenheim Partners now has $68 million every year that has to be given to them to invest, and they get to keep the profits of the investments. And the original 68 million is going to be paid down the road to Ohtani.
Right.
So, I mean, we talked about how the Jays and Rogers could have made their money back as a business investment. Same thing with the Dodgers. I mean, this is ridiculous that Major League Baseball is forcing them to put the 68 million aside and invest it. And it is nothing but a great deal for Dodgers ownership. They
100%.
cannot lose.
100%. And at the end of the day, I think for me, with the whole Soto thing, the Jays look like they were involved when they never were. You know what I mean? And say what you want about bringing Edward to the process. I mean, I don't think it was because they went, oh, let's go get Juan Soto. I think, there are different levels or different reasons why Edward was there. But at the end of the day, I think they quickly knew we weren't real players. And this
Yeah.
is not something we're going to be involved in. And you can say what you want, you can have your opinions, but at no point do I think they were a real player. And at no point do I believe they thought they were really in on this.
Yeah, my feeling on this whole process is that, as you point out, Edward Rogers was brought in because it's his toy. It was
Right.
his charter flight to the West Coast. He had never been in that room part of the process before that we know of. And I think, honestly, that Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins realized after that first meeting, and they have a good relationship with Scott Boras. Scott Boras probably said, you guys are like long shots on this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's why we see reports that the Jays actually never reached the 700 million offer mark, because they realized that it was futile and all they'd be doing is bumping up what the Mets and Yankees had to spend. But they allowed themselves again, and as we've discussed previously, they allowed themselves to be used as that fourth team involved in the process. Red Sox being the others, along with the two New York teams. Dodgers were on the outside, were on the periphery, but nobody really believed that they would be in that process. So the Jays, like good Canadian Olympians, finished just off the podium.
That's right. And we're just happy to be
Oh,
involved.
yeah, we had a personal best.
We're just happy to be in the conversation. You know what I mean? I mean, what more could you ask for? You know? And that, I will say this, Griff. I think there's a risk to this, though, because now there's this public idea out there that they have this extraordinary, unique budget that they can tap into for some reason, which I don't believe they do. But if
They
you
did in the
allow
Ohtani case, but that was unique.
That's right. And there was a very logical reasons which we've discussed why you could do that. But you've allowed this idea to foster out there and be present in the public mind, that somehow this could happen for other guys. And that's a dangerous thing, because when you don't spend it, you're sending a really bad message. So in my opinion, you either have the money to spend or you don't. And I think it's important to establish that with your fan base, because they do spend a lot of money. Let's be honest. Their payroll is decent, right? But if you have that money, use it. You have to get the guy. Give it to Vladdy. Give it to Corbin Burns. Give it to Bregman. Be the Yankees. Be the Mets. And they're not doing it. So I think it's
Well,
dangerous to suggest you are in the mix.
yeah.
Like,
If the perception is that they could have afforded Soto if they had so desired, then there's no excuse for not signing Vlad. Vlad being willing to a similar type 15-year contract, less obviously because he hasn't been to two World Series, actually has never won a postseason game. But his talent and his value to this franchise, to this country, is comparable, is more than Soto's right now.
I would say he's more marketable than Juan Soto in this market. So if I'm Vlad Guerrero, I'm going, wait a minute. Like I'm hearing you were going to offer him $650 million ish. You know what I mean? Like in theory, I don't
Yeah,
think that's true. So, but if I'm his
he
agent,
would
I'm going,
he
wait a
would have
minute.
heard more. He would have heard. They would have given the upper end of that.
Yeah, yeah, the 760 that Heyman said they were offering.
Until it comes back to Vlad, and then we never really offered that. Here's what we here's what we want to offer you.
Here's your 300, right? I
Yeah,
mean, my point is you have to factor that in of what the perception is and what actually is happening there. Because if you either have the money or you don't, and my opinion is they don't. It's a publicly traded company, Rich. You have to answer to shareholders. It's not Cohen, you know?
yeah. And it was a nice plane ride out for Edward Rogers and back, and he
Yeah,
got a chance to be with his baseball guys for
it's
10 hours
exciting.
there. And
Correct.
on the way back, he could have looked out the window and said, "This would have been the view that Ohtani was seeing last year if he had been on that flight,"
That's
but he
right.
wasn't.
But he wasn't. But thanks for involving us. Hey, thanks. That was really nice.
The other thing that has been popularly reported or suggested is that Vlad should have been included in the negotiation with Soto. And we've discussed this off air, but we haven't really gotten into it. But the feeling of not involving Vlad is just so right. You cannot involve a guy who's got 1 year left on his contract to help sign a guy to a 15-year deal, taking the money that he might feel should be going to him.
It's ludicrous. Like you actually it's the opposite. You don't want him talking to Vladdy. I mean, what's Vladdy like at present day, let's just be realistic where we're at with Vladdy. He's here for one more year and that's it. So if Soto's going, where do I want to be for 15? Hey, Vladdy, what do you think? Well, Vladdy's like, well, I'm not signing right now. Like I'm not signed. So regardless of the city's amazing, but you don't want that conversation to happen because
Yeah.
he's not you can't suggest he's part of the future. He's just not at this stage.
And I found it quite condescending to believe that just because they're both from the Dominican, that Vlad should have been involved. It's like when we go anywhere, and you know the feeling. You go on a road trip in the States, and somebody goes, "Oh, you're Canadian. I know someone in Vancouver. Do you know him?"
Yeah,
And
yeah, the old Dave story, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that yeah, what you're suggesting goes way beyond things you want to, suggest at that point. I mean, they're both Dominican, right? I
yeah.
mean, stop
I
it.
mean, we know that he's friends with Tatis Jr. We know that he's friends with some other guys, but I've
Sure.
never heard that connection between a close relationship between Vlad and Soto.
Right. And
So,
Vladdy's
like, why
Canadian
should he be
anyways.
included when that's his money going to the guy that he's trying to convince to come to Toronto?
Now, Vladdy may send him a note now and say, "Hey, thanks. I'm going to get a lot more money now.
Yeah, he should actually.
Let's be friends."
He should be doing that actually. That
Right.
which brings us now to the dam being broken on the Sunday night with Soto signing, and there were they close to $1 billion.
Yeah, it was quite an active
Yeah,
meeting.
and we're talking about deals like, I'll just go chronologically here. Edmund signing with the Dodgers, Snell signing with the Dodgers, um, Romano, which
Ryan signing with the Dodgers.
yeah, Romano going to the Phillies for more money than he would have won in arbitration. And just 4 days earlier, Ross Atkins said that he couldn't go below 6.25, which is the 20% maximum cut.
Right.
So that's why they let him go. They didn't tender him because they were hoping to bring him back at less money. And then Dave Dombrowski and the Phillies go out and sign him for more than he would have got in arbitration. Makes no sense.
Well, and again, I think one of the first times I was on here, a few months ago, the question you need to ask as a fan base is why aren't we retaining our players? That's where you need to go and question what's going on. Yet another example, because they themselves said they had zero health concerns. So when you're trying to rebuild bullpen with a beloved, pitcher in this market who's literally performed well for you, it begs the question, what happened? What happened again that the player and the team couldn't find a way to make this relationship work? I mean, you can't look in a vacuum and isolate every move and just look at it. There's a bigger question to ask. And yet again, with Romano, you're left to wonder, how did this come to be? If you want to just look at it on one, if it was a health concern, which we speculated, understood. You had the medicals, but then to come out and say nothing is wrong with him. And then a contender for the World Series pays his dollar when you desperately need players just like Jordan Romano. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And
It
when
begs the
when you
question.
think of the money being thrown around, the 2.5 million between what Atkins was unwilling to pay and what the Phillies were willing to pay, that's chump change when you're
That's
talking about what's going on now in the game. That's like Daniel Vogelback meal money, you know?
Rich, it's a 1 year contract. 1 year. You're
Yeah.
not signing them to a 10-year deal here. I mean,
It's not, I mean, even Chris Carpenter, who was going to be out for most of the season and then didn't re-sign with the Jays because they were trying to manipulate the money. And at that time, JP Ricciardi had more monetary restraints on him. But the Cardinals put a great deal of faith and signed him for more than 1 year, and that paid off. So it's the same, but not the same as the Jordan
they
Romano situation.
but they did just take a guy in the Rule 5 who can't pitch, who they hope shows some signs of pitching like Jordan Romano at 97 miles an hour.
But that just, it's one of those things where we're smarter than you. It's like when they took Elvis Luciano as a 19-year-old who became the first major league player born in the 2000s, out of the Rule 5, and there was an exception that allowed him to be picked in the Rule
Yes,
5.
right.
And where is Elvis Luciano right now? They kept him for a year. He was sort of mediocre. And then he disappeared. He went to Double A New Hampshire the next year, and then he's disappeared. So we got this guy, Angel Bastardo from appropriately
Parts unknown.
Venezuela. His
Yeah. Oh,
hometown is
Venezuela,
called
Venezuela.
Moron, Venezuela. And he's had Tommy John surgery. He's going to be out for most of the season. So they're going to have to go through this process of either keeping him it gets kicked down the road to 2020.
Well, they're trying to be tricky again with
Yeah.
this, where
Yeah.
because he's got to be on the roster for 90 days, right? So
Right.
90 days is less than a full season. So they're buying themselves some time to get him into their, pleasure palace in Dunedin and see what they have. And obviously with less time on where are we at as an organization by the time he's ready? And
Yeah.
if we're
So
not good again, we can carry his
right.
ass. You know what I mean?
So that's exactly right. They get to see them. They get to see Bastardo up close firsthand, and then have a whole year of rehabbing him, which is relatively cheap, to see whether they want to keep him moving forward. And or otherwise, they send him back, and it costs them, what did we say, $50,000.
$50,000. Yeah.
Okay. After that rant about Romano signing with the
Oh,
Phillies,
I've got more.
Clay Holmes, 3 years, 38 million. He's sort of in a rotation plan, just like a lot of these guys that are now relievers who see what Garrett Crochet did and want to become like that.
The
Yeah,
dollars and the
more money.
dollars that could be available to you.
Nate Eovaldi re-signing, good for him. Willie Adames, I like that signing
I really like
by
that.
the Giants. You
Yep.
know, I don't know if there was. I guess there would have been room with the Jays if they had gone after him hard, but he wouldn't have been able to play shortstop for at least a year because Bo was
Got
there.
one.
Yeah, got one. Thank you.
Yep.
Um, then Max Fried with the Yankees as their rebound signing.
What a contract. Like that's taking a chance. I mean that to me, I mean Max Fried is awesome. I love
Yeah,
him. If you don't like watching Max Fried pitch, something's wrong with you. But the man's never been healthy,
Yeah.
and you're offering him what, 8 years? Like it's there's risks there, but that tells you how desperate the Yankees are to compete and how much they're trying to compete,
Right.
obviously. So
Yeah.
I tip my hat in one thing, but you see the risk involved there. It's a really interesting deal.
Yeah. That's a lot of pressure from within it's intramural competition between the Mets and the Yankees. And when the Mets got Soto, the Yankees had to do something. And this is not a bad move if the guy stays healthy. I mean, Max Fried and their ace, that's a pretty good top of the rotation right
Oh,
there.
it's very good. It's very good.
Then you got Blake Trinan. I liked him re-signing with the Dodgers. Another Dodgers signing.
Another
Imagine.
Dodgers sign. If he's healthy, he's
Conforto,
elite. If he's healthy,
Conforto
he's
with
elite.
the Mets for a year. Oh no, who did he sign with?
Who's that? Sorry?
Conforto. Was he a Dodger also?
Yeah.
Yeah, another
Yeah.
Dodger signing.
That was a guy
Uh,
I like you. I thought that was a perfect fit for the Blue Jays.
which brings us now to the trade.
Yes. Speaking of
Um,
rants.
Andres Gimenez and Nick Sandlin, who's a usable right-hander. It reminds us of
Yeah.
Trevor Richards because he developed the splitter, as a second pitch to complement a 92, 93 mile an hour fastball. But he's never going to be a high leverage end of game guy. He's going to be a middle reliever, which
But you need him. You need those guys.
so Spencer Horwitz and a first year outfielder drafted in the fourth round by the Jays, who probably will never develop into anything. What do you think of that deal?
You know,
That's with the Guardians.
yeah, that's right. It, it goes back to what I was just saying. In isolation, Griff, I can understand, not hating the deal. But this just points to a deeper problem that I think you have where we're just getting back to this idea that we're smarter than you. You know what I mean? We're we do tricky things and those that, it's almost like this whole thing is an intellectual exercise. And the whole point is to get years of control and war where, look at how smart we are, yet somehow at the end of the day, we miss the point of winning baseball games. Like the guy's a great defender. Holy smokes. How deep are we going to dive into this model of defense? Now, Gimenez is the guy you add if you have a very good ball team that has all the boppers and that guy solidifies a middle of the infield. Your pitchers love it. He's the last piece, so to speak. You know what I mean? Here the Jays are, and this is what I fear. This is their move because they can't get the free agents in here. And this whole idea of defensive war, it's just like this crutch that wannabe intellectuals have. So, all of a sudden, well, I'm going to defend this move because you got to understand how it's the Dalton Varsho move, right? I'm sorry. We can point to how great his, outs above average are and defensive run saves. At the end of the day, are you winning baseball games? And can he be? It's a very smart man told me. He goes, you know what it's like? It's like the Jays take the periphery and make it the center. There is no center. Like your periphery can't be the focus of your ball team. So they must, if they go do the things we're talking about, and they go sign a Burns and they go sign a Bregman, and you go get some real players to add in, who I don't care who they are, then I can see the logic of the trade. But I don't. This is not going to help them win ball games on its own. It's just their offense is defense. Like
Yeah, but before I get into my take on the trade, you have triggered me with all this talk about war.
okay, I like it. I
So
lit the fuse.
that stands for wins above replacement. Am I correct?
You are correct, sir.
Right. So now you go and you apply all these numbers and formula to players in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s who didn't know they were in a war. It's like there are two
Well, if
countries,
they were in a real war.
there were two countries fighting or not fighting, and then you tell them he won the war. Like, we weren't in a war. These players from back in the day did not know that there was such a thing. They played hurt. There was only 16 teams, so there was like 400 players. 400 players. So wins above replacement. The replacement player for those guys would have been the 401st player. Now, when you're applying the 401st player probably has more war because he's playing now when there's 1,000 players. So the replacement is 1,001st player. Like, my point is that you cannot go retro and establish numbers to players who didn't know they were playing. Like Willie Mays saying, I could have stole 50 bases a year.
If I knew it was a thing.
Yeah, if I knew it was like getting you into the Hall of Fame or a thing, as you said. But yeah, so that's my
well, and my particularly issue
when I vote for the Hall of Fame, I don't even look at the war category.
My particular issue is defensive war. That's where you start to really get into some murky waters that we apply some sort of absolute number to something and take it literally when you cannot do that. You're not going to tell me a guy like Gimenez who right now can't hit at all, you know what I mean, is somehow infinitely more valuable because his war says so than a guy who's hitting 40. You know what I mean? Like he's collecting war because he plays a certain position.
Yeah, I remember when the
defensive war works.
I remember when the defensive numbers, the stats were just beginning, and Vernon Wells was a center fielder, and they said he had the least range of any American League center fielder. And the fact was there were like 3 starting pitchers who were ground ball guys, sinker ball guys. And like there were fewer balls hit to him. And so his range factor didn't measure up because he didn't have as many opportunities per game as, say, some guy on a team with no pitching, you know?
I mean, look, I don't want to have somebody come on and say, you fools don't understand.
Right. I don't either.
I get that. But I've always had an issue. And do I think Dalton Varsho is a good defender? Yes, I do. Do I think he's the best in the game? Not even close. Not even close. Is he very good? Yes. But how can you accumulate back in the day so much war playing left field? It's not possible. Like the position itself doesn't give you the opportunities to collect war on the same level as a center fielder does, which he is now. You know what I mean? But I mean, and the metrics defensively are still we're getting better, and I love the pursuit of trying to measure things, but you can't take them literally. And like I said, it's a crutch for a wannabe intellectual because it makes you feel puff out your chest like I know something the other guy doesn't. And sometimes I feel that's what this organization is after.
Yeah.
That look at us, we know more than you don't. Like you can't have Mark come out and say how unlucky the team was last year. And you know, a lot of it is unfortunate because by our methods, you know, we should have been better. Nobody cares. You win games or you lose them at the end of the day. And nobody believes the organization is just going to bounce back this year and win 86 games without doing anything. You know what I mean?
Okay, here's my take on the Gimenez trade. I love it.
Look at this. All right.
I've admired this guy with the Guardians for 3 years. He makes some plays. He steals base hits. And he handles the bat well enough to me as a left-handed bat, which the Jays in the infield have needed. I mean, we sat and watched Spencer Horwitz and Will Wagner and Davis Schneider try and play second base last
week. Not pretty.
They were ground balls. Like, okay, you don't react in the first megasecond, and so it looks when you dive like you made a great effort at the ball. The fact is you should have eaten that ball up.
Right.
It's happening with all 3 of those guys. So to me, any lowering of effectiveness by Barrios, Gosman, Bassett, Bowden Francis came on and was great. But the top three starters are all going to benefit from this trade because defensively, we saw ground balls go through the
Couldn't
infield.
agree more.
Now this guy's going to be eating them up. And maybe he'll even make Vlad a better first baseman
He
because
will.
of
He
his
will.
range that he's
He's
able.
elite.
Yeah. So there's that. The fact that I like his bat in terms of just being a 60, he's had over 60 RBIs each of the last three seasons, had one season with 19 home runs. He's not a big guy, but he's also had 20, 30, and 30. He's had 80 steals in the last three seasons, and that's an aspect that, Bo and Kevin Biggio and those guys surprised people when they ran. This guy's not going to surprise, and yet still can be effective as a base stealer. So in terms of the being the first step, I agree with you that if this is the only step, then they're screwed.
And that's my concern. I
I
don't
do
hate the trade
believe that
either.
they are going to make more moves. I do believe they're going to go out and get a bopper for one of the corner outfields because
Okay.
otherwise their outfield with Varsho in center, and if he's injured for the first, then you got Loper Fido and Lucas playing both corner and center, and you got Springer. And then unless you get somebody for left field who can hammer the ball like a Santander or a Teo, that is the worst hitting outfield in baseball.
Right. Right.
So I love the first step. And if you're going to recruit a free agent starting pitcher and you say, look at our defense, that counts for something
It does.
because now you've got a second baseman who's like all platinum. Not a blonde. He's not a platinum blonde, but he's platinum. And you have an outfield defense that's pretty good, really good, and a team that has won two team gold gloves in a row. So they can't score worse shit. But right now, you can lure maybe a starting pitcher, which they say they're looking for. I don't think it goes as high as Corbin Burns, but there's plenty of starting pitchers out there that maybe after Roki Sasaki decides, because he posted and now will come due January 15th. So
By the way, if you got all that money to spend, there you go.
yeah, there you go. And
There's your,
he's not
maybe you
gonna
can
his
make a
first
case.
his first couple of years are going to be like reasonable because he qualifies only as an international free agent, which limits the amount that teams can spend because they have an allotment for that. So the Jays, even if they weren't bragging about how flush with cash they were, wouldn't be able to afford him. So maybe they're waiting until Sasaki's situation resolves itself. Then they'll look at the Cal Quantrells of the world and those that we've talked about that could fit into the rotation and do a nice job as a fifth starter.
Right. And you know what? I think we kind of agree on the trade a little bit. My point is, if this is kind of what your market you're in, that can't be, you can't make the periphery the center. You're
No.
saying you like the trade. Obviously, we both understand that you must do other things. He must be that defensive piece that is surrounded by tremendous bats where you can carry that, and his bat will play enough not to kill you. You know what I mean? Where maybe he hits 15 in that park, 20,
Yeah.
and you're going to get
He
elite.
drives in 60 to 70. That's fine for a second
My
baseman.
concern is, well, you're not driving in 60 to 70 on this team right now because there's nobody to drive in. So
Well, I have great faith that they will add, and
you have to be.
you are a skeptic.
And I want to see it. And I want to see it because I don't.
Oh,
I
the other
don't.
the other aspect that I like in terms of just an insurance policy is with Bo going into his last season, if he's not very good this year and they let him go as a free agent, or if he is very good and he decides to leave as a free agent, then the possibility is there that they already have their shortstop in place in Gimenez, who played a full year with the Mets before he went over to the Guardians.
And I like that point a lot. I mean, and that's a spot where you want that premium defender more than anything, right? So you'd be willing to lose a little offense there if you add it somewhere else. But yes, he would be a nice defensive upgrade in subsequent years for sure at that position.
I'm just reading my own notes here, and did we discuss Scott Boras calling Edward Rogers a behemoth in
We did
sport.
not. I'm sure.
I'm sure that's framed and
Giant of the
the wall
industry.
at
A
Rogers
giant.
headquarters.
Yeah. I mean, can you just be any more blatant and trying to just, manipulate people to your own advantage down the road? I mean, well done, Scott. I'm
Yeah,
being mean. Yeah.
that's crazy what he does. Like he knows Hazel May and he knows Shy. And when he's talking to them, everything's about how great the new version without Paul Beeston of the
Yeah,
Blue Jays is.
that's
And
correct.
when he knows he has minions who tell him who he's talking to, like media from which market and whatever. And he has a pattern designed for every market that he speaks to. The
Yes,
guy's a
sir.
genius. And
Well,
he dresses well. He's a snappy dresser
he's
too.
a snappy dresser, but he those are his customers, and he's got to get as many of them in the room as he can to increase the demand, right?
Oh,
So
and
I
he
mean,
does. The room for him is the 3 or 4 days of the winter meetings. That's his room.
right? Oh, he loves it. No question about it.
Don't forget to tip your waiter. Uh, People may have noticed if they're watching on YouTube, but I am, for those listening on Apple and Spotify and wherever you get your podcast, I am wearing a Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame hat, which I support every year, and I'm in for the granny and as a member. And this year, Dave
Hey,
Perkins is
Perky.
being
Shout out to
he's
Perky.
going in
I
June
mean,
for sure.
long overdue there.
Yeah.
Long overdue. A legend.
So I have the ballot in front of me this year for the Cooperstown Hall of Fame, and I've been voting since probably 2003 or four. I take it very seriously, as do all voters. I mean, you look through numbers and you see who you like. And for instance, this year, Russell Martin is on, and I think we'll discuss who I vote for next week on
Okay.
our final. But right now, I'll just go
Just
down a
look at the
list of.
war, Griff.
Do I?
Look at the war. It makes it easier.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I ignore the war
Right.
numbers that they send or the numbers when I go on baseball reference and look up guys. I ignore war. I don't give a shit about war. What is it good for?
What does it go for? Yeah.
Um, so like Russell Martin, I will vote for Russell Martin the first year and then at some point leave him off the ballot. I want to see him survive the 5% minimum. It's like I know he's not going to be in on the first ballot. He may never get in, but just knowing and seeing him in the clubhouse and seeing his record of going to the postseason with every new team that he went to, I think I'll put him on the ballot for the first time.
People are
And
going to think that's not right. He's either a
yeah,
Hall of Famer or he isn't, right? I mean,
well,
I know it. I get what you're saying for sure.
I mean, my point is that if there's a Canadian election and you meet somebody who voted for the Green Party, does that make him an asshole?
Maybe.
It just means that that was what he thought.
Well, what you're
We
saying
all
is
are entitled to our opinions.
value can come in many ways, and sometimes it's not 100% measurable. You know what I mean? Seeing him in a clubhouse, seeing what he contributed to winning teams, because it's undeniable how much he won. You
Yeah.
cannot dispute
Oh,
that. It's out
I
there.
think with the Dodgers, then he went to the Yankees and they went in twice. Then he went to the Pirates and they went in twice. Then he went to the Blue Jays and they went in twice. I
Right.
mean,
I mean, you can't
how do you
deny
argue with
that.
that? Yeah.
Like, and how do you measure that, right?
Yeah.
And you got to see it firsthand. So the I get it. And
So we got on the ballot, I mean, there's the regulars. I think Billy Wagner was the highest that didn't get in last year, reliever. I think he'll get in this year. Uh, Gary Sheffield, I think is off the ballot now. Yeah, he's off the ballot, so he's not gonna. I voted for him every year. Then Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, A Rod, Manny, Chase Utley, Omar Vizquel, Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, Andy Pettit, Burley, Francisco Rodriguez, Torrey Hunter, David Wright, and some of the newcomers, obviously. CC Sabathia, I think, is going to get in. Ichiro will obviously get in. I
yeah,
mean, this is not a MLB Hall of Fame. This is supposed to represent the world.
supposed
And
to.
like, I mean, his performance before he came to the major leagues in Japan was
One of the greatest players ever played the
yeah.
game. Sorry.
So yeah, we'll discuss the ballot. But I'm honored every year to be on that voting list.
That's a big deal. It is
Yeah.
a
So
great
there's
honor.
like 500 votes that'll probably go in, and you need 75%. And if you have less than 5%, then you're gone.
You gone. She gone.
Which brings us now to we've talked about the payroll, the Jays payroll, and how they have enough money left to really make an impact in those areas that we've discussed that they need. They need a corner outfielder. They need one starting pitcher that they are promoting themselves that they say they need. When people look
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
rotation, and if you include the Ariel Rodriguez, you thought, well, there's five guys because they had Bowden Francis stepping up. I don't know if you agree, but they need a co-catcher. They can't go with Alejandro Kirk
You need a defensive catcher.
and somebody who can swing the bat just a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And they've taken care of a large part of the bullpen need if everyone stays healthy. But we thought that between 23 and 24, that going into the 24 season, that their bullpen was solid. And then there were injuries, contra performances like Tim Meza. What do you think of what they did with the bullpen, re-signing Jimmy Garcia and adding Nick Sandlin?
I it, it's the step we thought they needed to take. The only criticism I would have or critique would be I'm not sure they got the high leverage guys they wanted. I mean, obviously, Yimi Garcia, when he was here, had moments of that for sure. But there's reason to be concerned that that could continue. You can't criticize it too much. I mean, they've at least got some bodies in there, and then you can work from that. So, adding Sandlin in the trade, I think is smart. It gives you a guy that like we talked about the Richards thing. I mean, that's not high end, but you need that guy, and they
Yeah.
got him. So I'll give them that. I would have liked to seen something a little more high leverage that you feel better about, but I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. So I think I'm comfortable that at least they added something at this stage, and they know the guy they're getting in Garcia. So
Do you think that there's a possibility that if they do sign a starting pitcher and Yariel Rodriguez goes to the bullpen, that he could be a high leverage guy and maybe even a ninth inning guy? Because he always just breezes through his first couple of innings and then struggles after that. But his stuff is indisputable.
yeah, no, I think he's a real asset to have in that bullpen and just on your pitching staff. Like you dream on guys like that. You dream more innings for them. Can he do it? Right. Maybe you're right. Maybe an option is he turns into that guy. I could 100% see that. But you know, I would like to add more around it just for that to be a bonus than something you rely on. But yeah,
Yeah.
100% that's an option.
I mean, he's already got a contract for the next, I think, 4 years. He's got a contract for the next 4 years. So it's not like those relievers who covet being a starter because they can make more money that
Yeah,
way. His contract is locked in.
right.
Whether he's pitching high leverage, middle relief, or closing, or being a fifth starter. It's locked in, which is good. Which is good when you ask a guy to change his role, and it's sort of, especially when there are question marks surrounding it. I think there's an opportunity at spring training to try and find a significant role for Y-Rod that does not include being a fifth starter if they do indeed reach out and find somebody for that role.
Agreed. He's just a real asset to have in your pitching staff, I believe. So
The Pirates this morning suggested that right-hander Jared Jones is available in a trade, and he's controllable through 29. I would love that
I
guy.
mean, how can you be a Pirates fan? Like how?
Yeah.
Like seriously. I mean, I mean, just it's embarrassing how that team ownership wise operates, and I criticize anybody that works there, obviously. But man,
The Veterans Committee on Sunday to kick off the meetings voted in Dick Allen and Dave Parker. Um, There was no Garvey, no Louis Tiant, no Tommy John. And there were two Negro League nominees that weren't voted in. Did you think originally, going back, that Allen and Parker should be Hall of Famers?
100, particularly Dick Allen. I mean, he, when I started becoming a baseball fan, it was at the end of his career, but you know, I got to know who Dick Allen was, and obviously with my dad. I mean, and you then just look at the numbers. I mean, what an imposing, dominant ball player he was. I mean, I don't understand why it's taken this long. Um, just a complete dominant player in his era, and I feared, you know what I mean? Feared hitter. So
Yeah.
Parker, I love. I mean, I understand the conversation around it. I'm happy he's in. I thought, I thought Donaldson, the Negro League guy, would get in. I think we're still probably behind the times and giving these guys their just due. And I mean, what do I know? But from everything I read, he was as elite as they come. So I was disappointed there. And I still like Louis Tiant, man, and Tommy John. Like you can have serious conversations about those guys. Tiant in particular.
Yeah. Dick Allen well, he was Richie Allen at the time.
Yeah,
I
you
saw
know
him
more than me
in
for sure.
1970. I saw him at Jerry Park in 1970, and it was the first inning. He was called Richie Allen. And he hated it. He was Dick Allen, but Richie Ashburn was the Phillies' hero at that time, so they just called him Richie. Which,
The new Richie. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was a game at Jerry Park in September of 1970, and first inning, I just sit down, and Allen comes to the plate and hits with his 42-ounce Louisville Slugger.
Right. Right. It's like
He hits
bam,
a
bam.
line drive to center field that probably was still rising when it cleared the fence, and it went 450 feet. And there was an empty camera bay where they had the center field camera location, but the Expo didn't televise a lot of games, and so it was empty. And the ball hit, and it sounded like a Bears kicker doinking the upright. You could hear it from the press box, and you could hear it from the stands. I wasn't in the press box yet. And it was just like crazy. The ball rattled around in the cage 430 feet, halfway up the batter's eye. And I'm going, I love this guy.
Well, you know what? In modern terms, it's like I'm not comparing them at all but it's got that Giancarlo Stanton when he hits one. It's different than everybody else. Like
Yeah,
it's like you've never seen or heard a ball hit like that. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And it's like that's what I imagine Allen doing that kind of thing back then,
yeah.
but maybe
I love.
better.
So I already love this guy, and then he comes up with that quote because he owned racehorses, and then it was 1973. The Phillies went to Veterans Stadium, so it was all artificial turf, and the writers asked him, "What do you think of the artificial turf?" And he said, "If a horse ain't eating it, I ain't playing on it."
Well, I got news for you, Dick. You got to play on it. But
Well,
yes,
it was shortly after that he
yeah,
got traded to the White Sox and became an MVP in the American League. So
funny, right?
maybe
Funny.
he had it figured out.
Yeah, yeah, right.
I also have we talked about the golden at bat. I have an idea for a replacement for the golden at bat, and this was the commissioner, Rob Manfred, suggesting ways, because he's not a real baseball fan, ways to juice up the game.
Right.
And I think what was his idea? It was
What, the Golden at bat?
yeah. Oh yeah, you can hit
Once
for
a game.
yeah, once a game, hit for someone else in their lineup.
So the guy could hit twice in a row.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? If need be.
So,
Right.
here is my replacement that makes more sense, less sense than most people would want, but more sense than the
Than
commission.
that.
The golden at bat, Roman numeral 2. So in the last three innings, seventh, eighth, and ninth, you can one time, if your hitter is walked, hit, or catcher's interference, he can stay in the box and hit again. You put a ghost runner on first base, and that way you can't pitch around guy. You got to pitch to the guy, you know? And which is more
Okay.
important than having him pinch hit. You just brought in your left-hander to face three left-handers, and here comes their best right-handed hitter in the middle of that. I mean, it may look good, sound good to the commissioner, but it's BS, you know?
I thought
This
this was
this
going to be
one,
I
if
thought this was going to be the silliest thing I ever heard. That actually makes a lot of sense.
yeah, so if it's a full count, you can either walk, you can pitch carefully and risk losing him, and then he stays at the plate with a fresh count. And there's a ghost runner who might be a speedy pinch runner guy on first base. So it behooves you to challenge the guy. He could be their best hitter, but you got to challenge him because he can stay at the plate in late innings one time. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to say which guy you're going to do that with, you know? I like it.
Right. So you don't have to say our golden hitter is Vlad.
Right.
You can make the decision that, you know what, maybe Springer's up and just saying
Yeah.
you can make the call with him.
Yeah. So,
That is, you know what, I mean, obviously, I don't want any of that to happen because I just think, but because I actually saw something where people were talking about it, and someone said the answer is just ban the intentional walk. Well, clearly you can't do that ever because you just pitch around a
yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
You
Right.
just in fact did
Absolutely.
that. You just did that. You just
So, I mean, it wouldn't have to be Vlad, or it wouldn't have to be Bo, it wouldn't have to be anybody big like that. But say you're at the bottom of your order and Brian Servin is on deck batting ninth, and there's two out, and you've got, say, Addison Barger hitting eighth.
right.
You walk you walk him, but they want him to face you again because they don't want you facing servants. So I mean, it has a lot more potential as
It
being
makes
good.
a lot more sense. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
you're still messing with the integrity of the game because the idea is not to build the team where Brian Servin is on your roster. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you should get abused when you do that. But if you're going to think about creative ways to infuse, that is the best idea I've ever heard, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You would just have to redesign the score sheet. So in the seventh, eighth, and ninth, you got two halves of a box. So
Right.
that if a guy walks, you can not have to go down a space in your score sheet or screw it up completely, you know?
Just things we've been doing since the dawn of time. We're going to
Oh
change.
yeah.
But that's the best idea I've heard. I had no idea what you were going to say. But you're ineffectively avoiding them pitching around a guy.
Yeah,
You know what I
well,
mean?
pitching around him is worse than having the same guy come up to face somebody else because you can still pitch around him, right? I
Yeah.
mean, and there's nothing worse than seeing a guy in a big game situation, say bases loaded or runners on first and second, and you know they're pitching around him. They want him to swing outside of the zone. But if he knows he can stay at the plate again, he's not going to chase those pitches because he's going to stay at the plate until you challenge him.
If the idea is to generate fake drama, we do it, then that's the best idea I've heard. It creates a strategic elements on both sides, obviously. I mean, do I like it? No. Like I said, it's just better not to have
Yeah.
Brian Servin on your team. But
I
but
have the good news is that I had a source that I reached out to at the commissioner's office who suggested that the golden at bat will never, ever happen.
well, obviously, I mean, it's absurd. Like,
Sources tell exit philosophy.
yeah. But the problem with it is A, it got out in the public anyways, and B, that they're thinking of these things.
Yeah.
That's the real
Well,
problem. So
and
I
podcast.
hope I hope you floated this idea to your source because at least it doesn't completely destroy baseball as we know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like the idea. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Okay, I gave you a project in the off week,
Hmm.
in the days leading up to this. Hall of Fame voting taking place. Ballots have to be submitted by January 1st. Announcement on January 21st. But the challenge to you and to me was to find 5 pitchers that you personally saw pitch
Hmm.
They'll mostly be starters, obviously, that should have been in the Hall of Fame or could have been in the Hall of Fame if not for circumstances. But five guys that you think, boy, this guy gonna be a Hall of Famer or could be. But you have to have seen them personally.
Yep.
You
Yep.
got top five.
Exit philosophy top five list. The new
Yeah.
feature we got going.
If we had effects, we would be able
It
to.
sound like that. You know what I mean? All right. So I'll give you my number five. And this one, I took a little liberty. I did see him pitch on a few occasions live, but I was not in the industry at the time. And this is just, I've always been a fan of pitchers, like pitchers, not so much, just guys blowing guys away, even though as I get further, I love that too. But I've always been a fan of the crafty lefty, and I thought about, Jimmy Key, I love, who's not on my list. Tommy John, obviously, is a legend to me, and perhaps I should have chosen him, but the guy I chose was Frank Tanana. I absolutely loved Frank Tanana for a lot of reasons. I think mostly because of how he changed who he was and had one of the longest careers and is one of the best left-handers that ever pitched in this business. I think he's eighth in innings pitched among lefties of all time. And he came into the game throwing 100 miles an hour, so we believe, anyways. He was a flamethrower. And then in this day and age, he got injured and totally revamped himself to be a control pitcher for many, many, many years. And just was that guy crafty? Was he dominant like a lot of? I mean, obviously not because he's not in the Hall of Fame. Um, however, um, his mastery and ability to eat innings, which I love, and just perform above standard to me was just I just loved him as when I was watching him as a youngster and all through his career because I was a baseball fan. So I don't know if you have any memories of Frank, but I
I
love.
just I just know that pitchers who have had injuries constantly point to Frank Tanana and are encouraged that their career isn't over, that they can make those adjustments. So keep going on your list. Number four.
Number four to me, I'm gonna throw my first Blue Jay at you. Um, and just watching this guy work all the time, watching how he went about his business, and getting by, dominating people, throwing 80 poo, as he would say, is Mark Burley. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Mark Burley to me is the epitome of a professional. Um, no BS with him. No, no false hustle with Mark. He let everybody do their job, let the pitcher call the game, didn't want to overthink it, and just concentrated on hitting his spots with his four or five pitches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember asking him about going to pitchers meetings with Pete Walker or whoever was the pitching coach and the catcher. And he said he never did. And he didn't have a personal catcher. And then he smiled and explained that if he doesn't know what the catcher is going to call, and if he has three different catchers, then he's throwing three different games, and as you said, all he has to do is hit that spot, and nobody can guess his pattern because it's all different guys calling the game, and he's confident enough in his location and his stuff that there's no one right pitch in any situation, and he's proof of that. And I just laugh when he says, like, I don't call my own game. I just go with what the guy says. That's all. And that was his credo. That was how he lived his pitching life.
Because he spent his time on his pitches, what he could control, you know what I mean, and making sure he was hitting his spots with everyone, so it
Yeah.
didn't matter what you called. You know what I mean?
So
I loved why he was more interested in making sure, you got the Portillos in Chicago and things like he enjoyed life, like
yeah,
he was not
he was a great
overthinking.
influence. I mean, he tried to be an influence on our man Stroh, and he was.
Right.
But it wasn't longer as long lasting because he was too tall and too big for Stroh to like.
He didn't have a chip on his shoulder. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. That's right.
So who's your number three?
My number three, this one might surprise you. Just from my time watching him pitch many times against us, and obviously, I'm taking his ceiling of what he was. Again, another another pitch to contact, even though he struck a bunch of guys out too. Not saying well. Another complete mastery of the strike zone for me was Cliff Lee, and watching him pitch in person. When he figured it out after his first couple of years of not having that control, when he locked it in, there was nobody who had the control of Cliff Lee. Like he just had the mastery of a strike zone. I can just remember going in and facing him in Cleveland, and just you felt like you had no chance. And I mean, he's one of those guys because you know what? It's the Halladay style of pitching. That's what I love. The cutter was so effective. He had a tremendous curveball that he didn't even use because it was cutter. Anytime you got that's what pitchers do. Like you got to change speeds, but a little movement so you don't mind contact. You want contact.
Yeah.
Quick outs, and all of a sudden he's into the eighth inning every night. I just thought he was as good a pitcher's pitcher as I can remember seeing in my days watching as a Blue Jay employee. You may disagree with me, and of course, it's got the
When
technical background there.
Yeah. When you got to the ballpark to face Cliff Lee, you thought, "Oh, we got this guy." And when you left, you went when you were leaving the park, you went, "We had no chance."
That's the guys I love watching pitch. That's just been my
Well, clearly you've got a pattern. All three of your guys have been left-handers here.
they have right here. My last two guys are not though.
All right, who you got number two?
Number two is my one. These are my two favorite pitchers I've ever watched pitch. One is Dave Stieb. Um, as dominant a pitcher who you could, I think he'd be in the Hall of Fame if he pitched in a different organization. And, back then it was all about wins, and he couldn't get them.
Yeah,
He was pitching in the wrong time for the wrong franchise. You know what I mean? You can't tell me you saw, well, there's one more guy I saw that's dominant, but he was as dominant as they come. He was like that slider is just
yeah.
wipeout, like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he was as good a pitcher as I've seen. Like he was elite, elite. I don't think you could make an argument against that. I don't know.
He had a custom made home built in Reno and didn't put a guest room in. So that tells you about his list of friends.
Well, that was also an issue too, I suppose. But
All right, who's your number one?
my number one, I mean, I almost feel wrong saying it for a lot of reasons, but it's the best pitcher I ever saw, and that's Roger Clemens. Um, I wasn't going to put him on the list for obvious reasons, but I was a diehard Yankee fan growing up. He obviously the Red Sox. I mean, he was appointment television for me. Like I would seek out his starts to watch him pitch before any of the nonsense started. You know what I mean? He was just the best pitcher I've personally ever seen pitch. And he just has to be at the top of my list.
Yeah.
And obviously, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. Of course, he's a Hall of Fame pitcher, but
Yeah.
he's not. So that's why I put him on the list. He,
Oh,
he
for sure.
made the criteria.
My top five.
I don't know if he has a guest house.
Yeah.
He may not need it.
He owns Sugarland or
Yeah.
wherever. My number five, going down the list, Steve Rogers,
Oh, great.
right-hander, ace,
That's a great
ace
call.
of the
Oh, yeah.
the Expos staff, best pitcher. Didn't throw 95, 97, but there were no clocks on every pitch at that point, but his stuff was devastating. I mean, he came up in a rookie season, pitched a half season in 73 and was 10-5 with a 1.54 ERA in a half season. And he lost 20 games one year, never won 20 games. But I just remember the postseason in 81 where he beat Steve Carlton twice and won a game down the stretch that gave the Expos a chance for that second half title and going to the postseason. But beating Steve Carlton twice in a 5-game series, to me, just shows what kind of a pitcher he was.
He's a legend, man. I loved him too. I mean, he was the face of that rotation. Like just put him on the map.
Number four for me was a guy whose career was cut short, but when he was there, he was just like unbelievably intimidating and devastating. J.R. Richard.
Oh, great call again. Yeah.
With the Astros, he was on his way to what everyone thought was going to be a Hall of Fame career. Then he was hit by some sort of a stroke that stopped his career. and he ended up out of baseball and out of society. And it's a sad, sad story. People should look him up. But his stuff, he was throwing 100 before anybody was throwing 100.
No question. And big, intimidating.
Intimidating, yeah.
Wow.
He's number 4. Number 3 for me was Gator Ron Guidry.
Strangely enough, my first start, it was my favorite pitcher when I was a young lad. That 25-3 season.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, this
1978.
long and lean and just everything had snap and movement on it. That's the pitcher body and the pitcher delivery that should have been in the Spalding guide.
Should have been on my list.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Well, he's
guaranteed
a
win day.
left-hander.
I know. It's sure too hard.
Right. That's number 3 for me. Number 2 is Roger Clemens. And we've talked about Roger, but his 2 years he was in the American League, so I didn't see him until he got to pretty much until I got to the American League. And then his 2 years were just overpowering and stunning, but he's a bit of a dick. So that's number 2. Number 1
That's why he's not number 1, right?
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Number 1 for me is Doc Gooden, a young Doc Gooden. This guy was just unbelievable. And I was doing radio one time and he was pitching and somebody stole a base. I was doing it with Ron Roosh, who's a veteran broadcaster in Montreal. And somebody stole a base off of him, and he doesn't have a very good pickoff move.
No, didn't worry about it.
I said, yeah, well, in high school, nobody reached base. Like nobody was going to steal a bag when Doc Gooden was on the mound because you're usually down 4 or 5 runs. He's throwing a shutout, and he may never have allowed a guy to first base in a steal situation. So
hadn't worked on it.
Every time you get to first, go because
it's a free base.
But that didn't happen very often. But his stuff was, I mean, he was a right-handed Ron Guidry with the movement and the stuff. And like if his career had worked out differently, and he's another guy like Frank Tanana, who later in his career was able to make an adjustment. He went to the Indians, I believe, and he continued to pitch, was effective, but he was not the Doc Gooden that came up with the Mets.
And like I couldn't include Guidry and Gooden because I literally didn't see them pitch.
Yeah, well, that's the same with some of your guys. Like I really didn't see Dave Steeb pitch until he came pissing and moaning to the Jays for another
go around.
By that time, he wasn't on my list.
No, he was not the same guy.
I wasn't on his guest list either.
You weren't using the guest room. No.
So that ends the baseball portion of Exit Philosophy. And we will get to the NFL because the NFL is how we wrap up our weekly podcast.
It's a very popular segment, Griff.
Some people go all the way through the show just to hear the NFL.
That's right.
So last week, in week 14, you were 2-1 and are now 12-12 because we picked 3 per week. So that's in the 8 weeks that we've been picking. You were 12-12. And I was 2-1, and I'm now 15-9.
60%, I believe, if my math's correct.
Yeah,
that's the stuff of legends right there.
I mean, you're a coin flip, but I'm the real thing here, the real deal. All right, so we each got some games here. Let's go. It doesn't have to be in order of priority, but just give me one pick, and then I'll come back with one.
My first one is going to be the Carolina Panthers, -2.5 at home to the Cowboys. I think they're really trying to establish, which they are doing. I think they're playing hard, unlike Dallas, who actually are playing relatively hard at this point in time. I just think Carolina at home is going to put forth their best effort, and I think before it hits 3, I'm going to take Carolina at -2.5.
Yeah, no, I was considering that game. That's a good call. I like that. My first one, I am going to take the Eagles -5 against the Steelers because the Eagles, to me, are going to march through that conference. They need to win every week. There's no like we've got everything clinched. They want home field through the playoffs. They're up against the Lions in that regard. And I
You're
mean,
not concerned about the little rift between AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts?
no, that usually turns into something great.
Could be because it's throwing the
So
ball. He's right.
a few weeks ago, you were all down on Russell Wilson. Well, I've never come up off Russell Wilson. I still don't think that he's for real. He throws those
Moon balls.
moon balls and guy running under it. But yeah, I see this being a Saquon Barkley show, and I know that defense is tough, but I'm taking the Eagles -5 against the Steelers.
Okay. My second pick is going to be a team that never covers, but I think they're going to cover. I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs -4 at Cleveland. Um, they've been plodding along, getting victories, obviously doing what they need to do to get victories. And I think even for them, I bet you the belief inside that room is we need to blow somebody out and just get rolling here. It's time to, you know what I mean? Rather than see them yet again win a one-score game. Cleveland's not very good. Jameis Winston is Jameis Winston, and I know they're on the road. It's always not that easy, but I think you're going to see the Chiefs winning a blowout here and just kind of get people back talking about they're the Kansas City Chiefs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you because I think that I hate to tell Jameis Winston, but Satan is clearly on the Chiefs side.
That's right. So his prayers may go.
You got Taylor and Kelsey and couple of pick sixes and
That's right. He's going to have to wait one more week, maybe.
it's over.
It's over.
So my second pick, and that is going to be the Bengals -5 against the
You
Titans.
don't sound confident.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had like so many good choices that I picked this one. Bengals -5 against the Titans. I think Joe Burrows had to be living in a hostel because his house was invaded. So he'll be close to practice in the ballpark. And I think that that's going to make a difference.
Close to the ballpark. That's right. Okay. I do love the narratives. I do love the narratives. Yeah, yeah. All right. My last pick is going to be oh, this team is bad. The Jacksonville Jaguars getting 3.5 versus the New York Jets. Could the Jets blow them out? Sure, but could the Jets just finally just completely lay down? You know what I mean? It's over for them. Um, Clearly, they're a better football team, but I think in this instance, I'll take the hook there, the 3.5, and hope for just a really lousy, tight football game. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm going with that. So,
Yeah. No, I like that because last week I picked against the Jets when they were given 4.5 and they didn't cover. And so, like, given 3.5, same strategy, same logic. And I believe in what you explained there. I don't think they're going to cover that game either. My final one, I'm going off the board a little bit. I'm going Bills and Lions over 54.5 points. Meaning the baseline for both teams to me is 24 points. They're each going to score 24, and then after that, it's a shootout. So there's 48 points. So I only need one more touchdown after that. And somebody's got to win the game, right?
right, right. You're counting on that 24.
So, but I mean, it's indoors, perfect conditions.
Yeah.
Two teams that got something to play for.
Oof, do they ever? Yeah.
Both offenses are creative and like rolling in high gear. And I think 54.5 will be done by the end of the third quarter.
Heard it here first. End of the third quarter. Wow. Put the money on the over. All right.
So that wraps it up for us. I think because of the winter meetings.
Just want you to know when people ask about our picks, though, I say the Exit Philosophy podcast is running at a 56% clip.
There you
Don't
go.
mention that.
Yeah.
It's because of you.
Right. But I mean, it's six different. Well, we went head to head twice. So it's just slightly under 6 different picks per week, which you're being greedy if you want to go more than 6 games. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Right. You're a degenerate.
Trust us. Trust us.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, that's it for the week. And if you need to catch up on all the columns that I've written and any past Exit Philosophy podcasts, although going back to the NFL picks isn't going to help you now because those games have already been played. But we'll be back next week and then take a week off after that. But I appreciate everyone joining us for Exit Philosophy, and griffsthepitch.com is the website where if you need to catch up, it's all there. And Mal, thank you very much, and thanks to all our listeners, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.